Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dome9 webinar that we're having today. We're just going to take a few moments to allow some other folks to join, and we'll get started very shortly. Please stand by. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dome9 webinar titled Protect Your Azure Workloads with Dome9 Arc. My name is Thelen Blum. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Dome9, and I'm here with Patrick Pusher, our Technical Evangelist. In today's webinar, Patrick is going to provide a hands-on walkthrough of the Dome9 Arc platform for Azure, showcasing how Dome9 Arc provides comprehensive security orchestration, granular visualization of network security groups, and simplified governance for your cloud environment. We will close with Q&A at the end of the session. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available afterwards. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you would like to ask a question, please type it in the questions window of the GoToWebinar, and Patrick will address as many questions as possible, time permitting. Without further ado, I will now pass the ball to Patrick. Let's get started.
Thank you, Thelen, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for the next about 45 minutes. We're really excited over here at Dome9 to announce our support for Microsoft Azure. Microsoft Azure for us has been a real sort of building story. When we started, I think it's no secret that the first supported platform for Dome9 was Amazon Web Services. And, Azure became a kind of a rumble a few years ago, one we would hear sort of semi-consistently, which has really grown kind of over that time period, especially I think with our enterprise customers to be a roar, all the way from primary use cases to multi-cloud to all sorts of really interesting enterprise uses of the infrastructure as a service platform. So we're really excited to be able to say we support Azure, be part of Azure's customers' journeys to the cloud, just like we've been doing for AWS, and we're not done with platform support either. So watch this space. We'll be announcing more platform support as we go. So, in terms of where Dome9 kind of fits into the problem space, we'll talk a little bit about exactly what we do, but by now I think most of us are familiar with the delineation between what we expect out of our infrastructure as a service provider, and then what our responsibilities are within that sort of service framework, right? We get the capabilities from our infrastructure as a service providers, but what we do with that feature set, kind of how we employ it, is directly our responsibility. That's what this sort of shared responsibility that I think AWS popularized, but now really everybody has settled on. It's that configuration that Gartner and really other industry analysts tell us that that's where the security misconfiguration will happen. Right? It's not at the hypervisor level. It's not with the physical controls we get and the services provided to us by Azure. It's how we use them and whether we use them and whether we use them properly, whether we follow best practices or whether we're trying to maybe bring a security model from a different environment and try to adapt it to Azure. Whether we're making mistakes, whether we're doing it right, that falls kind of in our lap. And so this is the problem area or the problem state that Dome9 is really targeting to solve. And we do that by delivering a software as a service delivered platform, and it really speaks to, I think of it as a security orchestration framework, right? We know that moving to these public cloud infrastructure as a service environment affords us, brand new capability in how we manage our environment. And all of those new capabilities are super tempting, right? As we think about things like the procurement cycle back in the data center world, it's super tempting to move very quickly within, the new capabilities afforded to us by these kinds of environments. But the challenge becomes then, and once you start, scaling those environments, making sure your security controls scale with those efforts, right? Quite often we will try to bring security solutions from the data center world, obviously not physical appliances, we can't do that in the public cloud or infrastructure as a service world, but virtual appliances that we filter traffic through, agents and workloads, things that sort of compete, if you will, with the feature set we get natively from Azure, for example. So what you'll see Dome9 do is sort of take all of these concepts, security groups, network security groups, virtual machines, virtual private networks, and expose the data you get from Azure. It's the same data we get through the sort of use of the API in very different ways, and give you very different perspectives into your information, your security control detail. So most of our effort spent in the webinar today will be around this assess bucket, the one you see on the screen kind of highlighted. But you can think of our platform, we brand it Dome9 Arc, and the Arc stands for assess, remediate, and control. And in that assess bucket, this is where the journey starts, right? How do you secure something that you don't truly really understand, and that's the goal of kind of this assess realm, if you will. So we'll talk about two key capabilities and one other of Dome9 that really keep you informed, keep you provided with this sense of security, situational awareness, if you will. And that's the start of the journey. From there, we can talk about how we fix problems, how we keep them fixed. Dome9 has a piece of that story to tell as well. But today, we're really going to focus on the fundamentals. Our support for Azure is brand new, so we're going to start from the start. So Dome9 really creates solutions in sort of three realms. The one we think of as sort of table stakes, the low-hanging fruit is sort of the security operations, the day-to-day work that you do securing your Azure environment. And through very specialized views, through features like the Dome9 compliance engine, you're able to very, very quickly assess your environment, understand how you stack up compared to maybe best practice driven architecture, and even maybe to very specific kinds of things that are important for you to measure. Understanding where all of your launched virtual machines in Azure, where they came from. Were they launched from a pre-approved kind of image? What version are they? These kinds of things, right? That go a little bit beyond what you think of as traditional security. Once we do that, we're more in the compliance and the audit side, right? Trying to understand how our environment stacks up as compared to kind of a desired baseline. Still security, but now kind of straddling that line between governance and security. How do I ensure that my environment is configured in a way that supports my organizational goals within the public cloud and never deviates, right? And then kind of lastly, that secure DevOps mindset or perspective, right? Once you've made that journey to these infrastructure as a service environments and understand the new capabilities we have, scenarios like continuous integration, continuous deployment, immutable infrastructure become not only possible, but not as far out of reach as they were maybe a few years ago. And the capabilities of our infrastructure as a service providers keep getting better and better. So we're able to go deeper and deeper with concepts like this. So having a platform that you can use interactively, you can trigger by API to fit into your security orchestration framework that maybe already pre-exists. Dome9 plays a role kind of in both of those use cases. So we'll talk about all that as we go today. So we really think about three pillars within Dome9. Our tradition, our heritage, our leadership come from a network security kind of background, and that's where we started. And so on the network security side, we have tools like Clarity Visualization, which we'll talk about today, kind of understanding your security controls in a contextual way, understanding how they relate to each other, understanding how they relate to overall data exposure. That's really the goal of Clarity. But Clarity is one of maybe 6 or 7 tools on that network security side. So there's lots more. But then we'll also look at the newest single largest feature from Dome9 in the compliance engine, and what we're beginning to call software-defined governance. We have some announcements around this, kind of a second phase of this feature, if you will, coming actually next week. So I'll tease that a little bit today, give you an idea of what's to come. Lots and lots of development in the compliance and governance space, so lots to share there. And then enhanced IAM protection is really a very specific product focused on AWS IAM security. So we'll leave that aside for today. But know that everything we do, we envision bringing to sort of a multi-cloud scenario, right? And so Azure support is kind of one stop along that journey. You will find in every product that we have that is built for that kind of broad use case, not something specific maybe like IAM protection within AWS, but every kind of broad function within Dome9, our strategy is to make that sort of multi-cloud enabled. We see that as many of our enterprise customers' end goal, and the business drivers behind that multi-cloud scenario are many and variable, but we do find it as kind of a very desired state. So everything we build, is done with a goal of making it one level higher than, the specific technology platform you're integrating with. And compliance and even network security is no different. Clarity works the same whether you're looking at AWS versus whether you're looking at Azure versus whether you're looking at any future supported platform. So with that, let me show you just how easy it is to get started. Let's start with that. And to do that, I'm just going to pause my screen, and we're going to pop over to the actual interface here. One moment. Okay, so we're here at the Azure portal. I've already set this up, so we're not going to walk through the whole setup, but I'll show you exactly where to go. It's here within Azure Active Directory. And then you are going to want to create an app registration. I've done it here, but you'll click Add, and the instructions from this point on are here within the Dome9 portal. So if we go ahead and want to sign up a new account, a new Azure account, whoops. Some of these instructions are written for kind of the classic portal, some are written for the new one. So, but they're all here and they're all comprehensive. So this will guide you towards how to fill out these fields. You'll assign some permission to this application once you're done, and away you go. It really is, it's a 5-minute process, very straightforward. So let's take a look then. We're going to look at 3 overall features, Clarity, the compliance engine, and then the Dome9 sort of audit trail. Excuse me. The Dome9 audit trail, and different ways you can utilize the information you'll find there. So starting with Clarity, Clarity is often the tool that people learn of and come to Dome9 in search of. It's kind of this tool that you would use to do things that we similarly did back in the data center days. We would build Visio diagrams of all of our resources, our virtual machines, our filers, our network routing core. We would illustrate how they can all interconnect, and then we would do our best to keep that illustration up to date every time we had a network change, which, if you're a practitioner, that was pretty much a fruitless endeavor. It was never quite up to date, but it was good enough most oftentimes for what we needed to do. The equivalent to that within the public cloud really doesn't exist. And Clarity is our attempt to sort of give that back to the security practitioner. And what it does is it again, via that API integration to Azure, will read all of your security controls and paint you this picture of what your data exposure risk scenario looks like, and where exactly you may have data exposure risk that you didn't know before you went to use Clarity. I'll tell you that quite often in our onboarding sessions, regardless of the platform, when we first show a new customer or a prospect Clarity with their own data, there are sometimes audible gasps, right? Because they learn things that the traditional interfaces at the Azure portal simply really aren't great at illustrating, right? And mostly that's really around context. So let's have a peek then at what Clarity looks like in action. So I've gone ahead and reshared my screen out, and I'm going to go and choose Clarity, and kind of going along with the topic of sort of multi-cloud, you can see that we not only support various different cloud providers, but also various different sort of infrastructure as code formats as well. But today we're going to look within our Azure environment, and we will choose our North Central US region. And here we have one particular VNet that we'll choose. And we can see from a summary we have about 20 VMs inside, but what we're really interested in doing is looking at the detail of security control within this network. And with an overall goal of understanding, do we have, where we've exposed services, have we done so in an expected way? Or do we have some virtual machines that maybe are exposed in ways we didn't understand? That's our goal. Let me go ahead and pop back into Clarity. I think my session has gone away for some reason. I'll pick my region and I'll pick my network and view the graph. So what we're about to see here again, and here it is on the screen, is an illustration, right, of each virtual machine and how it's protected by its accompanied network security group. And overall, what we've got kind of working from left to right, on the left, you've got your traffic sources, right? So asterisk is everything, kind of that, that any rule that you might have associated with any one of these services that let broad internet traffic kind of in. And certainly you will have the need to do this, right, from time to time on broad, if you're serving broad web traffic, you will likely have a very permissive port 80 or port 443. These other IP addresses here you see are IPs that have been referenced within this VNet's security group rule set. And if we click on them, we can see exactly which rule sets those are. So this IP is referenced within this Open Swan virtual machine. Right, so in its rule set, and you can see exactly when you click on it which rules they are. It refers to this 52, 51, 168, 216 IP address very specifically, and you can see the detail of that rule set on the right-hand detail pane. So, interactively, you can work your way through this illustration and sort of begin to interrogate your network design to understand exactly where traffic is permitted to flow, and just as importantly, where it isn't, right? If I click on this asterisk, this is every security group that's configured to accept, broad internet traffic on one or more services. And I can see that they're all in my DMZ. When you see that color coding in the top, DMZ, partially open, internal zone, those are Dome9 conventions, right? When you chose Clarity and you chose the region in the network, Dome9 then read all this information and based on the rule sets, put your instances in one of these swim lanes. And the reason that all of these highlighted instances here, OpenSwan, Notification, your two web servers and your web app are here is because they have one or more rules that accept broad internet traffic. If we move over to the partially open swim lane, this is an instance that has one or more services that have some partial exposure. So some whitelisted kind of access is allowed in to this Bastion instance, but nothing as broad as over in the DMZ where you've got very, very kind of open, permissive, any sorts of policies, right? Then back here in the internal zone, these are security, not security groups, instances rather, that are configured to accept traffic from internal network nodes only, nothing outside this network. So they're really sort of configured, or rather considered internal resources for that reason. And now you can work your way through sort of clicking on virtual machines, understanding sort of the totality of the traffic they're allowed to accept and the traffic that they are configured to send out, kind of the destinations that they are permitted to send traffic to, both with the orange ingress and blue egress sort of depictions, right? I should bring up the legend for you to better understand what all this means. But that's the intent, right? Without clicking a single thing, when Clarity first loads, I can tell, do I have an instance in that DMZ that shouldn't be there, right? Did somebody affect some sort of change since the last time I logged into Dome9 that moved one of my, for instance, my MongoDB servers from my internal zone where they really should be over to either my partially open or my DMZ. That's what I'm looking for at a glance, knowing, is the information in the DMZ expected to be there, or is it there because of, misconfiguration or worse? That's the intention. Then, of course, as I click through each instance, as you saw, both in the detail pane on the right and then interactively with the color coding, again, I can understand all of the different scenarios of possible traffic flow. So it's very easy for me to go in and say, okay, in my database server, for example, let me click that. Where do I accept traffic from? Well, certainly it's not the broad internet, which is great, thumbs up for that. But I see that from my VPN server, presumably my OpenSwan host, I have a sort of a traffic is sent from my database server there, which is sort of interesting, right? I'm not sure why I would need that. So that might be something that I can investigate, but that's very easy to see. I have a single blue line from my Mongo database instance. So it means I have a rule that refers to my VPN server very directly. So, it's that kind of relationship that Clarity makes illustrating very, very easy. So with that, let's pop back to the presentation and continue on. So next, and probably this is where we'll spend the bulk of our time. So I want to leave enough time for questions at the end, so I want to get into this quickly. But the single newest capability from Dome9, at least from a large perspective, is the Dome9 compliance engine. And its purpose is really to measure your configuration across your efforts, either within Azure or AWS or any platform supported by Dome9, to measure those efforts against any sort of baseline that you're interested in, with a big asterisk beside any. We're just about to announce some new capabilities here today within our webinar demo. I'll walk you through the compliance engine. We'll speak a little bit about how it works, kind of who it's intended for, the information it presents, how you can trigger it, and then I'll tease you a little bit about what's coming next week in the ability to maybe not just pick from existing standards, but maybe craft a little bit of your own. We'll talk about that. So what is the purpose of the compliance engine? It's really about getting to that measure, again, in the quickest time possible. You know by now that Dome9 integrates with your infrastructure as a service environment via API, not by loading data or appliances into your environment. That kind of integration allows Dome9 a wide perspective around all of your network security efforts within Azure. And because of that, we can test a lot of different things. Network security port exposures, unused network security groups, lots of different criteria. And of course, the criteria keeps changing, right? As Azure keeps adding capabilities and sort of surfacing these capabilities via API, we utilize them. So the state of these bundles of policy that you'll find within the compliance engine is ever evolving. But it's really about, again, measuring, the quickest time to measure of getting a sense for how far or how close you are to that kind of golden state, if you will. And doing so without writing, a bunch of custom kind of code. This new capability that we'll talk about is able to measure very custom things without having a developer kind of skill set, right? We've seen compliance tools in the past that you do need kind of a developer skill set to go out and measure kind of custom things that you're interested in, and a design principle from the start. And our solution was to be able to do this, without that kind of background, and really just to be that center of truth, if you will, to be able to demonstrate over time, your ability to trend closer and closer to a desired state. Whether you're proving that to external auditors or whether you're proving that just internally within your organization to other stakeholders. So let's have a look at what this looks like. So we'll take a look here at the compliance policies, and we're going to take a look, excuse me, at a very broad policy to start with. So we do have certain support for external data security standards, external best practices, and then internal sort of best practice driven measurements from our technology integration partners, from Azure, from AWS, from any other supported platform in the future. And so we're going to run, just for sake of example, as we talk through really what the feature does, this Azure webinar policy bundle, one that I crafted before this webinar. It has 179 different rules that it will take and measure against everything you do at Azure. Well, maybe not everything. You kind of have that choice, right? When I run my assessment, I can run it against all the accounts I manage, all of the Azure accounts I manage, a single account, even like a single region or a single network, right? I can get very specific or I can stay very broad. I'll stay broad for this point, and I'll run this report and give you a sense for really what this looks like, the kind of information you get, and who it's intended for. Okay, so that was very quick. We ran 170 some measurements in a matter of seconds, right? And we did this across all regions, all uses of Azure, and that's very, very powerful. Not only can I do that against Azure, I can do that against any platform that I manage with Dome9. And the resulting report is really intended for two different audiences, right? It's intended for that compliance officer or that manager who's interested in information at aggregate, right? How I did from a pass-fail ratio overall. I can see that most of my failures are kind of in this medium severity, kind of overwhelmingly. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's important information. From a regional perspective, I can drill into how I'm doing, there versus my kind of global average, if you will. And it just really allows me, again, to get a comprehensive, what I consider security situational awareness report. And then below the fold, kind of the information you find down below is really intended for the security practitioner who will be charged to go and fix the problems kind of discovered by this report. So here now it becomes not aggregate information, but specific information, right? Here's a very, one we can all understand. Show me virtual machines with SSHs exposed too widely to, to the public internet. I can hit expand, and now I can drill into each of these instances that didn't comply or that failed, right? I have 5 that simply do have SSH2 exposed to the public internet. And now when I click on these virtual machines, I can visit them, right? I can click on this OpenSwan machine. I can open it up in a view within Dome9 that's specific for that machine. I can understand any network security group or subnet policies applied to that instance to understand the overall sort of traffic profile or what's allowed, what isn't, based on the network security group membership. And this context tells me both inbound and outbound, or this perspective rather shows me both inbound and outbound context. So it allows me to dig in deeper rather than having to jump back over to the Azure portal. I can get all that information here to be able to make intelligent decisions about my security posture. The takeaway though is that the compliance report gives you the information you need kind of at that high level, but then also as a practitioner to go and remediate each of these findings. Here's another, unused network security groups. So I have 13 security groups which don't really have resources assigned to them. And that's a little bit dangerous, especially if they have service definitions inside them. It's very easy in a always changing, always moving infrastructure as a service environment to to assign a resource to a security group. That's a trivial thing. So making sure that you have security groups, make sure that if you do have empty security groups that there are no controls in them. But if preferably just don't have them. So this report will find you 13. You can visit each one, determine if they're relevant, if they're needed, if not, delete them. So once you've run one or more iterations of a compliance report, you can save those. Those saved iterations appear in the assessment history with the overall goal of being able to, prove to somebody, a process, a governing body internally within your organization, of your continual efforts to chart towards that, that compliance standard, that desired sort of gold baseline, if you will. So every run that you save will appear here, and you can dig into sort of the detailed report, just like you can in a fresh run within the assessment history. You can also print reports. We really recommend, if you're going to share this information, to do so with the Dome9 account. Dome9 is a full multi-user system whereby you can create accounts for all the users and consumers of Dome9 information. And because this report is interactive and has links kind of to other areas of Dome9, it really is best served interactively. But we certainly recognize there'll be the time where you have to maybe socialize this information via email. Print this, you'll get a nice compact PDF format, and you can print kind of different variations of the report according to your needs. So that's that's how we envision making compliance way easier than before, and taking compliance away from the discussion of just kind of on a workload to a network security group, and to even more, right? As Azure develops more capability, and as we integrate with Azure more and more, you'll find the ability to test more and more kinds of entities, load balancers, all sorts of things. Obviously within Azure and Dome9, we're really just getting started on that journey. Now, let's talk a little bit about how you can trigger this. As you saw, I ran this kind of in an ad hoc way. You can also trigger this via API. So Dome9 is not unlike Azure or any other infrastructure as a service platform itself, in that we can be controlled and triggered by non-interactively by the use of the Dome9 API. So what many customers are doing is they will have a process that calls on that on the need to generate a report via API. They might do that daily. They might do that not on a time interval, but on a change-based interval. We have customers now who are running reports before a change window and then running one afterwards, just making sure that the change did not inadvertently break policy, if you will. So because it can be triggered by API, there are lots and lots of scenarios you can think of in your head where the clever and timely measuring of your environment is very strategic. So we talked a little bit about kind of the compliance engine feature as it stands today and as it's used today. Very, very soon, in fact, within a week's time, you will see an announcement from Dome9 that speaks to being able to take not only policies sort of off the shelf, as you see up here, but the ability to then craft your own. And you'll be able to sort of mix and match, right? Take the best you find from these externally published and externally governed data security standards like PCI, like the CIS Center for Internet Security, AWS Foundations. Mix and match from those, or build your own net new. And really, all of the excitement, I think, is in how those policies get built. We know of other solutions in this space that, I think I mentioned it before, require a fair bit of development, a fair bit of even a developer's skill set to get started with, right? I want to measure, show me all of my virtual machines that have specific tags, that are in a specific region, that have a specific amount of disk space configured, right? A kind of measurement that you would never find in a broad general data security standard, but one that might be very, very important to you organizationally, within your efforts, that's the kind of thing you'll be able to build. And let me just tease with you initially what a rule looks like. Here's a really good basic example of a rule. A virtual machine that is publicly addressable should not have any network interfaces that allow traffic on port 3389, which is RDP, of course, to a broad set of hosts, right? Pretty much understandable, even if you have no idea of how this language is structured. If you read that rule, which is modeled in as close to natural English as it can be, given it's a technical concept, you will understand what it's trying to say. And this is very different than, if you've got 200 lines of code trying to specify, the exact sort of detail of an exact entity to measure. Our goal is to take this one level higher than the individual sort of cloud service providers that we support, and being able to write policies that are broad, that we'll be able to exercise across, any multi-cloud scenario, any, Azure specific scenario, but they can get as specific as you need to be as valuable, right? And that's the goal. So more on this next week. Just know that we've been working on this for a long time. We're very excited. There'll be some additional capabilities, not just kind of the flexibility of your own rules. Watch this space. We're very, very excited to share this news. It's just been a little bit of a teaser. Back to our presentation. Lastly, let's talk a little bit about a bit more of a passive feature, one that you won't work with quite as interactively as Clarity or the Compliance Engine, but one that will be just as valuable in your efforts to, again, understand at any given moment what your security situational awareness really is, what your posture is. In the Dome9 audit log, in the audit trail, you will find a lot of information. Probably the most leveraged information in the audit trail tends to be, the changing nature of your security controls. Anytime a network security group is changed, whether that's at the Azure portal, whether it's through, another tool you've granted access to, it doesn't matter how the change is discovered, but, no matter how that change happens, you will find a log of when, what, and the detail of the change within the audit log. And we'll have a look at the audit log, and then we'll talk about different ways to consume it. We're getting kind of, I know, close to our time, so I'll go through this relatively quickly, and then we'll leave a little bit of time at the end of the webinar for Q&A. But let's get to the audit log. So you'll find it here in the analysis menu under audit trail. And if you are a multi-cloud user, you will find entries from all of your supported platforms here. If you are a multi-cloud user, but you're interested kind of in one source of origin, you can filter. If you are obviously just using Dome9 with one cloud, that's the only source of information you'll have anyways. But here under event source, rather under event type, we can find all of our different kind of Azure types of events. And the security group event kind of family is the one that I will filter for when looking for, all of the instances, again, of security group changes. You can use this information here. You can export it if you're really looking to maybe bring it into a different tool set. You can export it in CSV format, right? That's a handy way to get a complete inventory, really over any time interval you'd like, of every single network security group change, right? Talk about a complete configuration sort of management perspective, being able to tell, all the way back in terms of history where things changed, what security group and the payload of that change. So use that here within the portal, export that into your into CSV, into your tool of choice, or bring it into your SIM tool set, right? So Dome9 does have an export model. We use a couple of AWS services, SNS and optionally SQS, to publish that information in your audit log and your alert stack too. So if your SIM tool is a cloud-enabled one like a Sumo or a Loggly, they can read natively from that SNS format. It's becoming quite a supported format in the, with respect to sort of SIM tools. If your solution is more on-prem, SNS is a push technology, doesn't work well through uncooperative corporate firewalls. So we can route that information over to SQS, and then you can regularly pull and then kind of massage it into any format that you need, right? Syslog, most SIM tools can read from a syslog format, of course, but any format you really need to get into your SIM tool or your log aggregation strategy of choice, right? Not necessarily the SIM tool, maybe using something like PagerDuty, equally as supported and equally as powerful. So with that, that's really it for today. You know, again, we're really excited that we can include Azure users kind of into the Dome9 family. We see the need at Azure just as much as we see it at any cloud platform. As Azure matures, certainly the controls, the capabilities, the perspectives will mature as well. But Dome9 customers know the value that Clarity, the compliance engine, and even other tools that we didn't have time to go into today really provide in terms of that, that ARC, assess, remediate, and control. So thank you very much for spending, the last 35 or 40 minutes with us. I see there are a couple questions. I'm going to go ahead and just read these aloud and answer them, and then we'll wrap up the webinar. We do have many more webinars scheduled. We'll tell you about those at the end, but let's maybe go through these questions first. So the first one here is really about Clarity. There was a question around kind of how real time it is. It's very real time. So if you are at the Azure console kind of making changes, come back to Dome9, hit that reload button, and we will show you those changes kind of real time. So, and in fact, that's a popular use case for Clarity, right? If I, let me go ahead and share my screen again. If I am within Clarity, and in another tool, I've got, I don't have it open anymore, but I've got the, the respective sort of console of my infrastructure as a service provider, my Azure console, if you will. Getting perspective that Clarity gives you is really, it's not possible in any other tool. So what a lot of our customers will do is they'll have their network open, like you saw me do earlier, have it visualized, make a change, come back to the Dome9 tab with Clarity open, hit reload, and make sure that the change they didn't impact something else within their network. Network is a series of relationships, of course. So doing something, affecting a security control in one place can have effects all the way down the line, right? So what a popular use case is leveraging that real-time ability of Clarity, being kind of that confirmation mechanism, right? Did the change I just did at the Azure console, is it what I intended to do? And Clarity is very good at illustrating that because it is so real-time. The other question here is really about the compliance engine and the need. What does it say here? Azure has the Trust Center. Why do we need an additional compliance tool? It's a good question. I think our perspective on compliance maybe is a little bit different than most others. I think the Trust Center is a tool to help you understand what Azure does in terms of security controls, in terms of their own security certifications, really to build sort of trust in the approach to security that Azure mandates and takes. Our approach to compliance is, how can we build a capability that will afford you, the end user, the quickest time from, geez, I don't know the state of my environment to, conforming with your desired baseline, and how to do so in a way that is cloud agnostic. Right? The compliance engine within Dome9 is really envisioned and purpose-built to be one level higher than than is tied to a specific provider. So yeah, you can use specific terms like technology within load balancer within Azure versus application load balancer within AWS. You can write rules for specific providers, but so too can you write rules that are generic and sort of higher level than that. Network port exposures, for example. That's a rule that can transcend kind of any cloud provider. So our view on compliance is a little more comprehensive, one, than a single feature, and two, is more comprehensive than the majority of the focus kind of on the workload itself, right? Inside the workload, software installed, patch level, that sort of thing. Our perspective, mostly due to the fact that we come from a network security background, is a bit bigger than that. It's around network firewalls. It's around service configuration, right? It's around how you use Azure as a whole rather than what's installed, in any given kind of virtual machine. So our approach to, I think, network security is certainly different, and compliance is a little bit different, I think, than the native tools you'll find in those respective providers as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Patrick, for answering those questions. All right, everyone. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for attending. If you have any further questions on the information presented today, please don't hesitate to reach out to Patrick directly at the email address patrick@dome9.com. I have a few final notes. If you liked the demo we presented today and would like to try Dome9 Arc for Azure yourself, we're offering a 14-day free trial. Please go to our website, www.dome9.com, and click on the Let's Get Started button to sign up, and someone from Dome9 will contact you to activate your trial. Additionally, if you liked the webinar today and would like to hear more about the security solutions Dome9 provides, please visit our resource page on the website and sign up for several of our upcoming webinars. With the next one that we're offering being software-defined governance on February 9th. If there's a topic you would like us to discuss, please don't hesitate to contact us through our website and let us know. With that, we thank you for your time today and hope you found the content informative. This now concludes the Dome9 webinar. Goodbye and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.